The family of Mr. Padre, Tony Gwynn, sues a giant tobacco company 2 years after the Hall of Famer and longtime smokeless tobacco user died of cancer. Border agents talk about the endless battle to shore up our existing barrier with Mexico on a day when Republican nominee Donald Trump is in town touting his border wall. And who bears the brunt and who reaps the benefits of living near the Del Mar Fairgrounds? Civic leaders in North County take a look. I'm Mark Sauer. The KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer. And joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today, watchdog reporter Greg Moran of the San Diego Union-Tribune. Hi, Greg.
Hey, Mark.
Good to have you back again. Reporter Peter Rowe, also from the Union-Tribune. Hi, Pete.
Great to be here, Mark.
Great to see you here today. And KPBS North County reporter Allison St. John. Hi, Allison.
I'm glad to be here, Mark.
We're glad to have you. Well, a most beloved figure in San Diego sports, Hall of Famer Tony Gwynn died in June 2014 at age 54. The cause, cancer of the salivary gland. Now his family has filed suit against a tobacco giant, claiming the company who supplied Gwynn with smokeless tobacco known as dip knew it was carcinogenic. Greg, start with Tony Gwynn's addiction. How bad was it? How much was he using?
Well, the suit says that he began using smokeless tobacco dip in 1977 when he was 17 years old, and for the next 31 years, they say he consumed between 1.5 and 2 of those tins that you see, Skoal, Copenhagen,
those little tins
per day. The National Institutes of Health equates that to about 4 to 5 packs of cigarettes per day.
In terms of tobacco use and nicotine intake.
Nicotine intake and the effect that you have. So he was a very heavy user, even to the point where, you know, he would get up in the morning, be the first thing he'd put in his mouth. He'd fall asleep at night with a chew in his mouth. And
so, of course, he used it through his years as a college athlete here at San Diego State.
Correct.
All through his years with the Padres, 20 years with the baseball team.
Yes, yeah, just, constantly when he was on the field, off the field, working out, going to community events and so forth. There's a very sad narrative in the suit about how he had gone at one point in 1991 for a procedure on his neck. There was a benign growth that he had, and he comes out of the surgery and is picked up to go home. He gets into his car. The first thing he does is reach for a tin of tobacco.
And the thing that I think sort of touched me the most from your story is the way that he tried to stop, and in fact, the symptoms of trying to stop were so difficult he had to take other medications. I think nobody realizes just how difficult it is to stop.
A real drug, or a tough drug, nicotine. Well,
and Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Gwynn is unusual. I mean, it sounds like a lot. You say 4.5 to 5 packs a week or 5 a day, right? But I believe that this is fairly common in sports.
It's in that culture in baseball in particular, isn't it?
It's deeply embedded in baseball, although the baseball is trying to get it out of the sport in some ways. You know, there are right now, I think, a number of cities that have passed ordinances which prohibit using smokeless tobacco at city fields, Boston, L.A., San Francisco, and so forth. And another number of cities.
New York's looking at it too, according to your story.
And
that means ball players too. It's not just folks in the stand who can't smoke in most places now anyway.
Correct.
But it's ball players.
The issue is how you can enforce it to the ball players on the field. But I mean, the idea is that there is an effort to try to wring this out of the game and also its society at large. So
now, who specifically is the Gwynn family suing, and what are they asking for?
Well, they're suing. The main defendant is the Altria Group, which is the current owner, Philip Morris. Also, at some point, Philip Morris had bought U.S. Smokeless Tobacco, U.S. Tobacco, which was the biggest manufacturer of smokeless tobacco. They're suing them. It's a wrongful death and a product liability, product negligence lawsuit that's really based on a very extensive review. They had a researcher, I think, for a year go through this tremendous archive of tobacco industry documents that's located at the University of California, San Francisco.
Because they've been, in court for years.
They've been in court on the cigarettes.
right,
on the cigarette. And as part of the master settlement agreement, if you recall, a number of 46 states' attorneys sued the tobacco companies, settled it for billions of dollars. Part of that settlement required, the companies to turn over these internal documents.
So an enormous record on
a huge record that goes back decades and shows a lot of things we may know about cigarette smoking. So it shows, according to the lawsuit, very similar things in the smokeless.
In Altria's response so far?
They really haven't had one. I reached out to them a couple of times. They're kind of radio silence and things like that. I think they're going to, they have to be served with the suit, and I'm sure we'll hear from them from some point. They You haven't seen a whole lot of lawsuits for smokeless tobacco.
That's what I was wondering. Is this pretty
There was a case in Florida
setting?
about 5 years ago that settled for $5 million. Altria settled with a longtime user of it.
Not a celebrity or a sports figure.
Just a guy who was smoking a lot.
Person.
So, and there have been others here and there, but there's a sense that, this could, open the floodgates a little bit.
Right.
And that might be why they're being a little bit quiet. They want to go forward carefully here.
Well, this week I was listening to Sports Talk Radio after this happened, and one of the main lines that you heard was, hey, we love Tony Gwynn. It's a huge tragedy that he died, gone too soon. But wait a minute, didn't everyone understand that tobacco was addictive and dangerous and potentially lethal?
Yeah, it's bad for you. Why are you using it?
Well, there are a couple answers to that, because I heard that a lot too after the story, emails and things and phone calls from people. I think there are two things. One is that the lawsuit says, we know that now. That wasn't known when he started and when he got addicted in 1977. There were no warnings on smokeless tobacco until the mid-'80s.
Decades ago. Yeah.
And to compound that, the lawsuit says, based, I think, on many of these internal documents, that the industry knew that this was carcinogenic, that it caused oral cancers, didn't tell anybody. So,
gave it to them free, kind of used them.
it was a huge marketing campaign. Even the term smokeless tobacco, the Surgeon General says you shouldn't call it that.
Well, this dovetails, excuse me, hold that thought, Allison. This dovetails nicely into a bite we have from Tony Gwynn's daughter, Anisha Gwynn-Jones, about why they feel they have a strong case in this suit.
Our dad was proud of his work helping kids and being a positive role model to his fans. But the whole time, the tobacco companies were using his addiction to turn him into a walking billboard.
So they're saying that you see Tony Gwynn, he's got kind of that dip there. It's obvious with the ball players, as we were noting. So he's kind of implicitly endorsing this product.
And one of several at the time. People of a certain age, I think us can remember Earl Campbell and Walt Garrison and all these sort of celebrity athletes, put a pinch between my cheek and gum. And
the commercial ran forever on TV.
Ran forever, and that was part of the campaign. And these documents seem to indicate as well that it was, as with all marketing campaigns, focused on certain demographics: young people, athletes, African-American males, college students, and Gwynn at that age ticked all those boxes. So.
So I was just wondering why it was that he didn't actually sue before he died, in the sense that he obviously knew that it was likely to be the cause of his death. And was there some reason why he couldn't? Was he benefiting in any way from this, or was it the tragedy that they got him addicted and then he didn't get any benefit, but he couldn't give it up?
I think probably more B. Those are questions which I really haven't gotten to yet. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you can't sue for wrongful death if you're alive, right? So, I mean, that was kind of the issue there. And also, I don't think he got a benefit. I don't think he was a paid spokesperson or anything like that. He was free advertising, and very good free advertising.
All the hits are free. Well, that does dovetail into another bite we have. Tony Gwynn Jr., of course, his son and a former Major League player himself. Let's see what he thinks his dad would have thought of this whole lawsuit and what good it might do.
He knew dip causes cancer, and he would be relieved to know that his death was the catalyst to getting tobacco out of baseball.
Okay, so that's the push there, and as you say, no specified damages at this point. Well, now, what are the chances of the family winning this case? What do legal observers say based on tobacco cases and this one in particular?
Well, I think because there's not a huge record of litigation, connected with the smokeless tobacco issue. I think and tobacco companies are very adept and very good at defending themselves from product liability cases. They've been doing it for many years. He's got a very powerful and effective legal team. So you'll have to see. I think clearly one of the issues is going to be this individual responsibility. Nobody was holding a gun to his head telling him to dip against this body of evidence that they're trying to amass that shows, individual responsibility, but there's a lot of corporate responsibility when you produce a product that you know is toxic, addictive, and potentially lethal, and then design a marketing and advertising campaign around it to get more people to use a product that is addictive.
So they paint the corporation as the pusher, and of course this beloved ball player is the victim. Does the San Diego jury buy that?
Right. I mean, I think Greg's story pointed out that you have a very unappealing defendant. I mean, we all remember the tobacco executives there swearing that their product was not addictive. I mean, clearly lying. And then we have the most beloved athlete, I would argue, in San Diego history, who dies as a result of this product. So you have a very appealing plaintiff and a very unappealing.
Right.
Well, we'll certainly see how this all plays out. Very briefly, a couple seconds left. Timetable on this?
This will take a while. I mean, the suit was just filed this week. They've got, I think, 30 days to serve it, and then I'm sure the first step will be the tobacco companies trying to knock out all or as much of this suit as they can.
Yeah, and the civil cases take a
months.
long time anyway. All right, we are going to move on then. Thank you. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump is in town today, bringing the issue of immigration and his notorious plan for a wall in close proximity to our border with Mexico. But many Americans may not realize we already have a border wall of sorts, one that gets breached with regularity. Pete, start by telling us about that fence in San Diego. How long is it in our region, and when did it go up?
Well, San Diego shares about 60 miles of border with Mexico, and of those 60 miles, 46 of them have at least one layer of fence. The rest of it isn't fenced because just nature itself is this huge barrier. If you go out, if you've ever traveled along the border in San Diego County, you know how rugged the territory is. So there's no really purpose to be putting fences up in these mountains or these canyons that are just inaccessible. So we've got 46 miles of a primary fence, and then we've got 13 miles of a secondary fence in especially trafficked areas such as San Isidro. And this goes back to, it was 1985, I believe, when Operation Gatekeeper started, and after Gatekeeper, kind of pushed immigrants further to the east, they were building this wall. And really the whole idea of a border wall dates back to Duncan Hunter. As far as we can tell, he's the first person.
Duncan Hunter Sr., not the
exactly, the first Duncan Hunter,
yeah.
When he was in Congress. He was arguing that we should wall off the entire border.
Decades ago. Yeah.
Decades ago,
yeah.
Right.
Now, your story in the UT, you talked about the constant battle between smugglers and the Border Patrol. Set that scene for us. What's it like on the Mexican side, the American side? It's quite a different scene, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fascinating because it's a real chess match that's going on, and you talk to the Border Patrol agents, and it's just kind of a fact of life for them. It's not that they're upset or anything, but they're constantly responding to the moves that are being made from the Mexican side. So what happens is, in especially densely populated areas such as Colonia Libertad in Tijuana, you've got smugglers who have clients who want to come across. And so two smugglers will, at some key moment, either it's foggy or it's dark or Border Patrol trucks have passed by, they'll hop the first fence, which is relatively low. It's about 8 feet tall. So two of these guys will hop that fence, and then they'll run to the second fence, which is about 15 feet tall and topped by concertina wire. So there's no point in going over it or trying to go over it. Instead, what they do is they take an axe and they make a break in the fence at kind of ground level. And then the second guy's got a battery-powered saw, and he saws like a tunnel opening. And it's only about 2 feet tall and about 2 feet wide.
But enough for somebody to slip through.
Enough for somebody to get through. And they push that down. All of this takes 30 to 45 seconds. These are people who are very skilled at this. They do that, then they run back. They wait and see if Border Patrol is going to send anyone immediately. If not, they send their clients through the fence.
And what are they charging these folks typically?
$3,000 to $5,000 is what we hear the going rate is. That's
One
if,
person
that's
to
if
go.
you're Mexican. If you're Chinese, or for instance, we had a story today about Haitian immigrants.
Right.
If you're from somewhere else, generally you charge more.
Okay. And then your story also noted that the weather helps out. The fog helps these the smugglers out.
Yeah.
You can really get foggy there because it's near the ocean, obviously.
It is near the ocean, and if you've lived here any length of time, you know we can get some really foggy mornings, some foggy evenings, and those are the days they say they may get 5 or 6 breaks, or what they call compromises, in the fence that day.
It's interesting that the double fencing you described, the hardening of the border and everything like that, is still pretty easily breached. I think you said in your story it happens with great frequency. And there's always that old saw about a wall, 20-foot wall, 21-foot ladder.
Right.
And over the years, I think over the past decade or so, the federal government has tried to kind of do that with sensors or get around that with sensors, all these other things. I mean, what is I mean, what is the wall technology that works, if any, or has this worked?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they do, as you mentioned, they do have electronic sensors that are planted in the ground. They wouldn't talk about that, but we know they're there. You can see the stadium lights, which are maybe every 50 yards, something like that. And
Cameras,
they're up high. Cameras that are also kind of covering different arcs that are overlapping. So all of that is in place, all that's being monitored, and still you have a fair number of people going through. Now, fair number. Admittedly, the numbers have dramatically dropped in that sector.
And in recent years, overall, across the whole length of the border, but especially here in this region, right?
Especially here in this region. We were talking to agents, and they said it really peaked here in the 1980s. It peaked in Arizona in the 1990s, early 2000s, and actually it's kind of peaking right now in Texas. So it really depends on the geography and the...
But so kind of what you're saying is in relation to recent years and much bigger spikes in terms of people coming over, maybe this whole national debate about a border wall and Trump's plan and all is overblown, saying we're relatively secure now, as it were.
Well, I suppose there is a congressman who said, this is a 14th century solution to a 21st century problem. And maybe it is. There are some folks who point to our success here, or our relative success here, and say, well, look, wall works. But with every move, there's a counter move.
And I think it's true to say that the state of the economy has had perhaps more impact than the wall on reducing the amount of immigration that's coming in the sense that if they have a way of earning a living, probably many would like to stay home with their families rather than come here.
Yes, if you look at the entire border and then you kind of match up the economic trends with the immigration trends, you see a clear
And I don't know if you've
correlation
done
there.
the math, but one of the points you make in the article is that all this money being spent on the wall could be spent on more, productive things. And if you divided the millions of people who've come in by the millions that have been spent on the wall, maybe you could pay for them to stay in a sustainable way back where they came from.
Peace Corps aid or increase in foreign aid. Yeah, there's a hard.
If you take a global position.
Yeah, and I think that's a valid idea, but in this political climate, boy, I don't know if that idea would fly at all. Now, you spoke with some border agents for your story regarding Trump's wall, and Mexico's going to build it and everything we've heard about that. What's their opinion on that, or do they avoid having an opinion?
Well, they avoid having a political opinion, but they say listen, they're not going to speak for Mr. Trump, as they called him, and also they're not sure what the details are. They'd like to see some details. I mean, so far it's been very sketchy. I mean, Trump has said there would be a wall, it would cover the entire border. I think recently he's kind of backed off from that, said not the entire border, nature again. Yeah. But he's also insisted that Mexico will pay for this, but no one's really sure how.
Well, the Border Patrol Union has endorsed him. So
that's right.
That's correct.
I read that recently.
They're
right.
sort of, in his corner on that.
Which is very unusual, too. Because
this early, it's unusual.
And I think there's members of their ranks who aren't that happy about that.
Yeah, because, I mean, theoretically, the end game of this is if you could somehow construct a wall that is the impregnable wall, you don't need a Border Patrol anymore. There's a lot of guys out of work. So
I wonder if he's looked at the economic implications.
If you get to zero
lots.
on that apprehensions number, then it's...
Before we leave this topic, I did want to ask one other thing. You had written about the Door of Hope, and once a year the border agents open it and get a handful of approved families to come. Tell us about that here in the short time.
Well, yeah, this has been going. This year was the third year. They haven't been consecutive. They had 1 year where they didn't do it. But this was arranged by Enrique Morones of Border Angels, and the idea is to unite families, if even briefly, at the border. These are families who have, some visa problems, immigration problems, but they get cleared by Border Patrol on our side and by Mexican authorities on the Mexican side. So there are no criminal things happening here. And the families come, and at a set time, on a set day, this door is opened. It's opened for all of, I think it was 20 minutes when we did this, and each family had 3 minutes. So there were only 6 families that were able to do this.
Wow. Well, a glimmer in midst of all of this and the political turmoil, and we'll see what Mr. Trump says when he visits San Diego today on all of this. We are going to move on now. A report out this week says Solana Beach and Del Mar enjoy financial windfalls of varying amounts from the Del Mar Fairgrounds, where the surf famously meets the turf in horse racing season and where the county fair plays for a few weeks in the summer. But to say the report was met with skepticism is a bit of an understatement, maybe a grand understatement. Allison, why was this study done, and what were the high points or the main conclusions?
Well, the study was done as part of a settlement that was reached back in 2013 when, following the Fair Board's attempts to expand a hotel and condos on the fairgrounds, they're trying to raise enough money so that they can replace, those old exhibition halls that are pretty darn old. And basically this settlement resulted in them not building the hotel and the condos, and said that they would assess, well, how much do our neighbors, Del Mar and Solana Beach, actually benefit from having these millions of people coming to the fairgrounds. So the study was done, and it's concluded that after you look at just a few fiscal costs and benefits, that Del Mar makes about $1 million a year, and Solana Beach makes about $200,000 a year.
Well, they must be delighted with that here, all this free money coming in.
Well, the thing about the report is, it's so hard to estimate the costs of quality of life. So if you've ever driven up 5, you know what it's like when there's a big event on in the Del Mar Fairgrounds. I mean, you can hardly even get off the freeway. You could sit on those off-ramps for an hour. So it's the noise and the traffic, and then crime as well, which some of the council members said, look, you haven't estimated really how much crime has gone up. So the report did its, well, the people who did the report, an Oakland-based company, said that they did their best to assess the sort of hard facts. But really, when you come down to it, it is true. Solana Beach is more next to the fairgrounds. Del Mar is kind of sheltered by that hill that comes down. So Solana Beach is saying, we are the ones who get most of the brunt of all of this traffic and this noise and this upset and this crime, and we are getting a tiny fraction of the proceeds, as it were. So,
and they're saying that report didn't value these kinds of things, not just the impact on quality of life and all, but even the real
roads.
Cost of roads, real cost
Yes,
of police
that's true.
protection, etc.
Right. I mean, they're pointing out that the roads that get used to get there, if you think about it, you never go down Del Mar Heights and then try to get through Del Mar to get to the fairgrounds. You go through either Via de la Valle, which is right on the edge of the two, or down Loma Santa Fe, which brings you right through Solana Beach. So the road costs, they argue, should be much higher for Solana Beach than Del Mar, and yet in the assessment here, the consultants say that Del Mar actually spends $44,000 on roads and Solana Beach only spends $17,000. So that was just one example of what the Solana Beach City Council felt, really, this doesn't ring true.
Criticized it. Now, what could these local leaders really do about getting rid of the fairgrounds, even if they wanted to?
Well, they all agree there's nothing they can do. This is state-owned land. If you remember, Jerry Brown was talking about selling it not so long ago.
That's right.
So they can't really do anything to remove the fair. And what's more, they don't want to really remove the fair. I mean, the Solana Beach Council said Solana Beach would not be this Solana Beach without the Del Mar Fairgrounds. So what they want, though, is to get more of the benefit and more recognition of the amount of grief that they get from being right next door to this extremely loud and populous event.
And in the midst of all this in the last several years, what's happened to horse racing? It's not exactly going great guns these days.
You got it. That's the problem. I mean, even the Del Mar Fairgrounds is having a hard time figuring out what to do to not only improve the exhibition halls, but deal with the fact that horse racing is possibly on its last legs. There's only 2 venues left in Southern California. Del Mar's one, apparently the other one's owned by an octogenarian, and when he dies, nobody knows. So that has been one of the main sources of revenue. So the fairgrounds themselves are also looking at what can they do to promote income. They're not they're not rolling in money, as it were. Somebody is making a lot of money from those events, maybe the gun shows, but the fairgrounds doesn't have a lot of money to throw to the cities.
Well, they have some other events. You mentioned in your story a rock show or a music show, and
Kaboo.
They complain about that because it's loud. And
well,
more
Kaboo
people.
started last year, and this is one of the great white hopes, I think, of the fairgrounds, that more music events would replace the horse racing. Solana Beach, I spoke with one city council member, Lisa Hebner, and she said, well, they are building an indoor venue, and they are saying that they'll have, better sound controls, and they're promising us. But the fact of the matter is that music events are pretty loud. And again, Solana Beach is the one that will get the full brunt of the noise rather than Del Mar.
Well, in general, what was the reaction to these bottom line figures, $1 million for Del Mar? Did people think $200,000 for Solana Beach? Would they think that was high, low? And, I mean, in addition to what it didn't estimate or take into account,
yes.
that bottom line figure, were they kind of surprised that
yes,
they
I
net
think
out $1 million?
Solana Beach, Del Mar's City Council has not actually considered it yet, but Solana Beach was very skeptical that they were getting a fair shake out of this.
Well, we're going to have to see with more reporting on what they do, if anything, and how this plays out. That does wrap up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Greg Moran of the San Diego Union Tribune, Peter Rowe, also from the Union Tribune, and Allison St. John of KPBS News. A quick programming note to our radio audience. The Roundtable is moving back a half hour to 12:30 starting next Friday on KPBS Radio. And a reminder, all the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today on the Roundtable.